Hi everyone, welcome to Chapter 5, Drugs and Consciousness. So I believe that this is the most fun part of Chapter 5 because we get to learn about how drugs alter our consciousness as well as learn about some specific drugs, which is pretty fun in my opinion. So let's get started with first talking about how drugs interact with our consciousness, and then in the next lecture we'll talk about the specific drugs. So the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between substance abuse and substance dependence. Now, substance abuse is when someone has a reoccurring problem associated with a drug. So this could be like people that go binge drinking or will drink away their problems. This could be someone that every time they go out to party, maybe they use cocaine, something like that. So this is where people are using a drug, whether it's alcohol or some like hard drug like cocaine, heroin. It could even be like caffeine. This is where someone's using a drug more often and has a problem with using it. Usually, then a substance abuse, then they'll use the drug as a way of dealing with problems in their life. However, a key thing with substance abuse is that the person is not addicted to the drug. Okay, so substance abuse just means abusing the use of the drug, but you're not addicted. Now, the difference then is when we're talking about substance dependence. So if you're dependent on a drug, then that's what we call an addiction. So substance dependence is a more serious pattern of use, leading to clinically significant impairment, distress, or both if someone doesn't get the drug. So again, this is when someone's addicted to a type of drug. Now, a very kind of low stakes addiction we can talk about is coffee. Personally, I have a coffee addiction. I'm dependent on coffee in the morning. And if I don't have it, I can't think right. I'm very irritable. I actually get a bit shaky without it because I'm so used to having caffeine all the time to kind of boost my systems. So I actually see problems when I don't take caffeine. And that's what we see with substance dependence, is that we see some kind of impairment in someone when they don't take the drug. And that's how you can tell when someone's dependent on a drug. Now, going off of dependence, even just substance abuse, then you can develop what's called tolerance. So tolerance is a key feature in dependence, which occurs when people need to consume an increasing amount of a drug to achieve intoxication. So in other words, the more you use a drug, the more you're going to need, like the more amount of that drug you're going to need. So again, if we're talking about coffee, when I first started, I only needed like 1 cup of coffee a day and I was good. As time went on, I started drinking 2 cups and now I'm at 3 cups a day in order to continue feeling kind of normal, in order for the caffeine to do its job. And that's because I built up a tolerance to caffeine. In other words, I need more of the drug in order to get the same feeling. Now, obviously in caffeine, or even like drugs like, say, marijuana, it's not as big of a deal because they're not as harmful of drugs. But this can be a big problem when we're talking about, say, cocaine, heroin, or even alcohol, because this can lead to some very dangerous health problems. It can obviously cost a lot of money, and it can really kind of ruin people's lives due to this tolerance. Now we see tolerance happening usually because of a physical dependence. In other words, the body is dependent on the drug. And so the body then starts to require more of the drug. So that's a physical dependence. A psychological dependence would be where you just kind of think you need it. So again, this could be like people that drink or take drugs to escape from some problems. Then they have a psychological dependence on the drug because they need the drug in order to feel happy, in order to kind of hide those problems. So without the drug, then they go back to kind of maybe a depressed state. They experience these memories or the problems that they don't want to deal with. So that's a psychological dependence. And we do see tolerance occur with both of them. So again, what tolerance does is it decreases the response of your body to a drug. And therefore, you're going to need more of the drug to get the same response. And this is because your body is trying to maintain what we call homeostasis. So homeostasis is kind of resting state. It's like ground zero. And, usually a drug will make you, go higher. So if homeostasis we say is 0, I'm going to draw. It's going to be great, guys. Okay, so let's say here's a line, and we're going to call this homeostasis. We're going to call that 0. When you take a drug, it's going to increase your feelings or your body responses over time. Now, when you get off the drug, obviously what it's going to do is you're going to go below 0, and that's what we call withdrawal. And then your body's going to attempt to go back to 0. So it's going to want to go back to homeostasis, right? Well, what happens over time is the more you take a drug, your body will kind of start here, and then by taking drugs, then now you get to homeostasis when you're on the drug. So you no longer get that high feeling. So if you want to get a high, you have to take even more drugs. Now, obviously, this is going to create a bigger withdrawal, okay? So tolerance is just saying that you need more drugs to get that high feeling, because over time, your body gets used to having that drug. So without the drug, so for me, without coffee, I'm below my homeostasis. So with like 1 or 2 cups of coffee, I get to homeostasis. And then in order to feel like that caffeine rush or anything like that, I have to take extra coffee on top of that. And then obviously once the coffee wears off, I kind of crash. And I go below my starting point. Okay, so obviously I'm just telling you my experiences with coffee, but we can see this with other people that are dependent on all types of drugs. So this could be nicotine from cigarettes, this could be heroin, this could be weed, this could be alcohol. So many different types of what we call drugs that can actually show this kind of thing. Now, when talking about tolerance, we're going to also talk about compensatory responses. And so that's that physiological reaction that's opposite of the drug. So again, that's this negative, this kind of opposite thing. So I'm going up, but then I need to fall back down, right? So that's the opposite of the drug. And what's happening is the body is trying to adjust to the imbalance of the drugs. And that's what over time leads to kind of this starting point that I talked about, where my starting point with coffee is now below 0. And that's because my body over time has developed a compensatory response, so that when I take my first 1 or 2 cups of coffee, that brings me to homeostasis because my body's used to running on coffee. So what my body did was when I'm on coffee, my body has adjusted so that my new normal is on coffee, and when I'm not on coffee, I'm negative. I hope that makes sense. So now we have tolerance, we have the compensatory responses, and now let's talk about this downfall from the high. We're going to call those withdrawal. So, obviously you have a short-term withdrawal when you kind of stop taking a drug. It could be, if you take a drug one time, you get high, and then, you fall off the high. You kind of crash. That could be withdrawal. That's a one-time withdrawal. Obviously, the more you take the drugs, the more dependent your body becomes on the drugs, the more intense the withdrawal will be. So, again, I'm going to draw our little thingamajiggy. So here's 0 for homeostasis. It's not a straight line, I'm aware. But again, remember, your body, because you're dependent on drugs, this is your new normal. So when you don't have drugs, this is your normal, and then you need drugs just to get to homeostasis, right? Now, even without getting high, even if we're just here and say this is like over like years or even months, now when you stop taking drugs, instead of just going back so it's the same, so instead of we're going to do a dashed line. So instead of going there, your body's going to do withdrawal, and withdrawal causes it to go further down. So now you can see that the response during withdrawal is extra negative, okay? And again, this is because of those compensatory responses, because your body had this as normal, or this is where you were, and with drugs, your body got used to it. So now you fall more negative. Now what's going to happen is your body's going to try to make this move back up here by using your compensatory responses. So what it's going to do is it's going to pretty much try to shift your homeostasis back to where you are off of drugs, right? So this will continue, and this will become the new 0. That's going to become your new homeostasis. Now, because it's doing this, what it does is it really shifts what's happening in your body, and that's where you get those negative side effects, like the shakes and the sweats. Your body will crave the drug. Pretty much your body doesn't know what to do, and it's trying to readjust itself back to a new 0 again. But it's doing all of this, the withdrawal, very quickly and all at once. Whereas when you're developing a drug tolerance, or you're developing that compensatory response, this is happening very slowly over time. So that's why you don't get these negative symptoms like the shakes, the withdrawal, the vomiting, all of that's associated with withdrawals. Whereas in withdrawal itself, then all of this compensatory responses, this adjust back to 0, is happening very quickly, and so it kind of overwhelms the body. So a key thing that I want to talk about is how tolerance is connected to your environment and how it can lead to an overdose. Because if we're talking about drugs, I'm not going to tell you not to do drugs. I'm just going to tell you how to do them safely. To each their own. Everyone probably has experimented with different drugs at different times, and that's all up to you. I just want to make sure that you're doing it safely and understand why. And maybe if you know someone that's experiencing this, you can help them do it safely as well. Um, when talking about tolerance, remember what that did was your body needed more and more of a drug to get the same high. Now, this only really works when you're talking about doing drugs in the same place. So the environment that you're doing drugs actually has an influence on the high that you get. So to explain this, we're going to talk about classical conditioning a little bit. It's okay if you don't fully understand classical conditioning right now, because that's what we're going to talk about a lot in the next chapter. But classical conditioning really takes one variable and connects it with a second variable. In this case, it takes the environment, and the environment becomes associated with the drug. In other words, what's happening is what we call a conditioned drug response. And this is where the tolerance for a drug is influenced by the familiarity of the drug setting. In other words, if you are always taking a drug in the same place, so because we're going to talk about overdose, I'm going to talk about cocaine. And so say you're a habitual cocaine user, and you always take cocaine in your bedroom. Okay? And over time, you're going to develop a tolerance. So over time, you're going to need to take more and more of the drug to get the same high. Now, because your body, because you always take the drug in your bedroom, what your body does is it decides that your bedroom is associated with drugs. So now every time you go into your bedroom, your body's going to see the bedroom or like experience it, and it's going to prepare your body to take the drugs. So it's going to go, oh, hey, we're in the bedroom. We're about to take some drugs. Let's start some compensatory responses so that we can handle the drugs, right? Now, what can happen is if you then go to an unfamiliar setting. So you always take cocaine in your bedroom, and now all of a sudden maybe you just move to a new house, or maybe you go to a party. And what happens is your body then can't prepare for the drugs because it doesn't know that you're about to take drugs. So when you do take drugs, your body's not going to be prepared for it. And so if you then take the same amount of drugs you take in your bedroom, you're no longer going to have this tolerance because your tolerance is associated with the environment that you're taking the drug in all the time. So that's what can lead to overdose, is your body is not prepared to take that amount of drugs in that environment, and so people will then overdose. And this is a lot of times what you see with people that are habitual drug users that have taken the same drug for years and years, and then one day they'll overdose. And it's usually because they tried to take the same amount of drug they always take, but in a new environment. And that's because your body's not prepared. So here's kind of a diagram about how this process works. So the first time you take a drug, you take a drug for, this could be the first time, this could be like 2 or 3 times, and your body's slowly going to produce these compensatory responses. It's going to try to get back to normal. Now again, repeatedly taking the drug in the same setting, so in your bedroom again, let's say, over and over again, your body's going to develop these compensatory responses every time you take a drug in the bedroom. So now, after like a while, let's say a month or it could be a year, you walk into your bedroom. So you're in this setting alone. Now, without taking the drug, your body's going to automatically create these conditioned compensatory responses. So even without the drug itself, just having the setting alone will create these compensatory responses. So when you take the drug, the same drug dose, again, let's say here, I'm going to put a 3.5 here. You take the setting alone plus the drug, again, you're going to have these conditioned compensatory responses. So you're going to be fine. And then 4, now you're taking the same drug dose, but in a different setting, an unfamiliar setting. What's going to happen is your compensatory responses, these guys here, they're not going to kick in full strength. You're going to be back to step 1. Okay, so because you're back at step 1, your body can't handle that much drug. And so the drug produces a stronger reaction, and that's more likely to then produce an overdose. So we're going to stop. No, let's do 2 more slides. We're going to do 2 more slides, guys. There are a couple myths about substance abuse that I want to talk about. The first is that drug tolerance always leads to a significant withdrawal. That's not true. Just because you develop a tolerance doesn't mean you're going to have a major withdrawal. You will still have at least a minor withdrawal, but it probably won't be major. Okay, so again, like when I take coffee, I have a tolerance for coffee, and if I were to stop, I do get a little shaky, but it's not a major withdrawal. It's not like, say, someone that's taken heroin for 5 years and then they stop. Our withdrawal symptoms are going to be super different. Even though we both took our respective drug for 5 years, and we both developed a tolerance to it, our withdrawals are going to be very different based on just the drug alone, but also just how your body responds. Because some people, even if you have 2 people that took the exact same drug for the exact same amount of time and the exact same amount, their withdrawal symptoms will still be very different. The myth number 2 is that if a drug does not produce tolerance or withdrawal, you cannot become dependent on it. This is again false. You can become dependent on a drug even if it doesn't produce a tolerance or withdrawal. So one thing we could think about is even like sugar. Some people consider sugar a drug, like sugary drinks or something like that. People can be dependent on, say, Diet Coke. And, they don't get a tolerance for it. They don't need more and more Diet Cokes a day to get the same feeling. But their body can still be dependent on it. And same thing when people stop taking Diet Coke, they're not going to go into major withdrawal. They're just going to kind of go back to their 0. So they're not going to, I'm going to draw real quick again. So remember homeostasis, we're here. Dependency is this, so now you need drugs just to get back to homeostasis. If you don't have withdrawal, you're just going to go right back to the same amount. So see how that's the same? So this can happen with some drugs. So you're still dependent on the drug to get to homeostasis, but you don't experience withdrawal and you don't need more of the drug to get here as you go on. And the third and final myth is physiological dependence is a major cause of addiction. And again, that's not necessarily true. Remember, there's 2 different types of dependence. There's physiological and then psychological dependence. And both types of dependence can cause addiction. And then it's also important to note that you can be addicted to a drug without dependence. Okay? So you may just be addicted to the high feeling, but your body itself is not dependent on the drug. So let's actually stop there then. And in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about specific drugs and break them down for you all.